Hello, everybody. Welcome back. My name is Andy Chan-Patera. I am a BAC alum, a proud parent of a BAC landscape architecture alum, so it was wonderful to hear the presentation earlier, and a member of the BAC Board of Trustees. On behalf of my members of the board, thank you for joining us today. I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Eric Haydel, MID 2012, MSIA 2018, Principal and Creative Director of Eric Haydel Design, M-Geough. Eric has served the New England chapter of ASID as president and continues to work with the national organization on various committees. I have known Eric since my master thesis time at BAC, so it is so wonderful to have him back and give us a talk today. Eric's presentation, Understanding the Next Generation of Business, will address the upcoming wave of workforce members, introducing the requirements and expectations in the professional sphere. Eric will explore our collaboration with AI and its potential to enhance our work environments, while also shedding light on key market demands for the future. Welcome, Eric. Thank you.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. Am I supposed to see it on here? That's the question. No, okay, good. So I'm just watching this. Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be back here in Cass Hall, to see you all outside in the big world. I have to share a couple of disclaimers before I begin. Number one, if you came here solely based on what they wrote as the description of the presentation, I'm very sorry, it's not that good. They are very convincing and they're very good at putting this together. So I encourage you to keep giving to the BAC in their efforts. Secondly, I am not an academic. I'm a practitioner. I am in the field now for 13 years, and I've had the privilege to work with my colleagues, baby boomers, Gen Xers, and so on. And so this continues to be an area of development that I enjoy and passionate about, like many of my colleagues are passionate in their respective fields. And third, I'm probably going to say something that is either going to stir you internally or upset you. And I expect to do that because a lot of this is based off of generalization. When we talk about generation, there isn't a specific set. There's always some overlap. There's always going to be a couple of years that overlap the other. And there's always going to be someone who has a little bit of both and all the above. And so if I can get my friends to click us through, I will begin and sort of ask you very frankly, how many of you are managing people in your day-to-day? And how many of you know those people that you're managing? For the most part, great. And you'll click, it'll kind of animate itself. Yep. And so I want to talk about the fact that as managers, this is really what it looks like. We have this vast vocabulary of ideas and principles and stress and anxiety, but it's all things that we've learned in our career paths here at the BAC or at whatever institution you may have learned. In your very first studio, you learned about planning, you've learned about strategy, you've learned about investigation. And so simply what we will talk about today in generational relationships is in fact those three concepts. It's understanding the individuals that are sitting at your table, the strategy that needs to get them through the day, and how we plan effectively to get to the next one. It's that simple. You learned it from the beginning, and so it's easy to do it now, right? I don't see too many convinced faces. The truth about management is that we are required to be agents of change, and that is a scary word. But in my time traveling and speaking with colleagues, I will say, what is the number one thing that you do in your profession? And 9 out of 10 times they say, I change people's lives. I enhance their environment. I enhance their relationship with space. I bring them an agent of change. And so yet again, we as creatives are challenged with something that we already know how to do. It's already within our vernacular. It's already inherent to who we are as passionate, creative people. The difference that we don't know and we weren't necessarily taught because of where we came from is based off of this slide here. As we evolve through the generations, we are required to embrace the idea that not everyone can be treated equally. I told you something was probably going to upset you somewhere along the way. When I went to grade school, we all sat on the same mat. We all wore the same uniform and the same shoes and the same backpack. We all went to lunch at the same time. We all went to recess at the same. And many of you in this room can relate to that. The difference of today is that it doesn't exist anymore. Our society isn't so rigid, and it's more connected in the world of diversity than we ever have been. You realize that this new generation upon us, Generation X, Y, Z, which is the vast majority of where we are, we'll talk about Gen X, is the most diverse generation of our history in the world. Over 26% of this new generation comes from an ethnic background or an other background outside of the traditional segment of what we define the baby boomers to be, specifically in our country and our workforce. And so the idea of managing and acquiring change through equity becomes a much more valuable mindset as we approach all of our generations. So as we move forward, we have to start back a little bit. The Pew Research Center defines, for the basis of our conversation today, the elements of what make up each generation. So my grandparents would be in the silent generation, those who were faced with put your head down and work. We got through the Great Depression. We don't ask for anything. We're grateful for what we have. Most of that generation is not in the workforce. The next generation is the baby boomer generation, which maybe some of you are in this room, or maybe some of you are participating. These are the individuals who were born in 1946 to 1964. They're my parents' age, maybe some younger grandparents in there. Followed by them is my sisters, Gen X. I was a big baby by 8 years. Oops, I suppose. And they were born in 65 to 1980. Then we go into the millennial generation, which I fall into, 81 to 96. And then the generation that we will really identify today, Gen Z. These are the people who are coming into the workforce as we speak. And as I talk about each of these generations, you will see that they each face their own levels of adversity. They reached something that changed their view of the world. And that becomes important because how they view the world and what they faced actually tells us how we approach them and their concerns that they bring to the table every day. I won't go through all of them, but I'll highlight specifically the idea that up until the millennial and Gen Z generations, the word technology was not readily available. Technology was machinery. Technology was industrial. Technology was not tactile. It wasn't necessarily a part of our lives day to day. It wasn't something that we survived on. It wasn't the thing we needed to wake us up and to go to bed at night. And so as all of these individual generations have faced adversity, remember that none is more important than the other. Let me rephrase that. No one person's anxiety or animosities are to be treated equal to another individual. That's where the idea of equity comes into play in generational management. So we start off and we defined what I like to call the generation of perfection. You see, this is the generation that my grandfather, I should preface this and tell you, I grew up in South Louisiana. My grandfather walked to school the same direction, 6 feet up a hill, in snow, barefoot, wrestled 6 alligators, and then he made it to school before the nuns rang the bell. Everything was still perfect. We could do no wrong. I got to poke a little fun, right? And so the traits that really define the boomer generation, as we refer to it, will come up. These individuals are work-centric. You can just keep clicking until we get through all 10. They're independent. they're goal-oriented, they are competent, they are loyal. These people started and finished typically in the same institution where they began. They apprentice there, they retire there. They're passionate about what they do. They're hardworking, they don't ask questions, they move forward. They're the perfect idealist. The world is beautiful. They follow chain of command. They never question authority. And most of all, they are socially confident. They lived at the best time in the best way possible. And if we listen to them, we would be perfect as well. Then we go to Generation X. I'll tell you a little bit about this generation. I sort of call it the forgotten generation. It's kind of been squeezed in. This is the generation that today should be the voice at the table, leading the conversation. But many people in this generation, because folks are living longer and not retiring at 58 or 62, whether it be financial reasons, whether it be life reasons. This is the generation that has been sitting at the table in mid-level management. They're managing projects. They still have a boss on top of a boss. This is sort of the forgotten generation in our workforce. And some of the key traits of this generation are they are self-reliant and they're very self-directed. They adapt socially because they've had to. They're typically the first generation that has two working parents out of the house because they were forced to. They tend to be collaborative because they have to work to educate their children when they come home from school. Also, their spouse who may not have had the education. I remember going home with long math and my parents wanting to scratch their eyes out. My father's an educator, teaches science, and couldn't understand long division because he didn't have to do it that way. So new expectations came to set within this generation and the children they raised. They are not joiners. They don't have the time. They're working to provide for their family. They're willing to accept, but they are skeptical. They're creatures of habit, like their parents. They prefer stable careers. They are cautious, and they are also loyal to the people who are loyal to them. What's interesting out of this generation actually is that 55% of today's startups are produced from Gen X. Next, we go to the me generation. And why is it all about me? Well, you're right. It is about us. Because we had to figure out how to get home from school. Because mom and dad were working. Simple as that. I had to figure out how I was going to get to track practice because my parents weren't available. I had to figure out how to do my own homework because no one was there to figure it out for me. Those are general conversations that people in this particular age group have faced. We had to learn to cook for ourselves, clean for ourselves, make our own bed. What about me, right? Sounds a bit crazy? Not so far-fetched in the mind of a millennial. And here's the story. If it wasn't provided for us, we created it for ourselves. Think about it. We've seen the most advancement in technology, in resource and application, in things we don't need, but we want in this generation of individuals. They consume the most amount of product in the world. Why? They're as large as the baby boomers, a little bit more. So as you see, 83.1 million millennials are in the workforce right now. That makes up the vast majority of it. These are people who are not necessarily loyal, but I will tell you, lots of us tend to be opportunists. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. But if you will define the personality traits, my fellow Geminis might want to throw eggs at me. I told you this would stir you up a little bit. But in the perception of playing what we look at in research, there we go. We are risk takers. We are entrepreneurs by spirit. We are emotionally stable compared to generations that will come after us and some that came before us. We don't just desire, but we require flexibility. We are intellectually curious. We will invent, we will create what we cannot have or find. As I mentioned to you, we're not loyal, we're job hoppers. We are trendy. We like to buy and acquire things that are available that seem to be hot and hip. So everyone knows that we did it. We are short-term directed. Don't give us a project that's going to last 6 years. We want 6 months, then we move on. We are impatient. Remember, we didn't want to wait for mom to get home. We did it ourselves. We want to be recognized. Remember, I'm the generation that everyone got a trophy. And we are technologically savvy because we had to learn very quickly or we would be run over. I'll tell you that I got my first cell phone the night I graduated high school. And my sisters, who are a few years older than me, were very angry that in high school, I got a phone. I remind them that it was the night I graduated, but it's still a big family argument all these 20-somewhat years later. The idea that I had technology out of my hand and could talk to anyone I wanted without having to dial in here and knock one of them off of the internet, or had to have the bag phone that my mother said, if you use that, you better be getting stabbed on the side of the road, to which I replied, how would I use it? Handed me a cell phone for the first time in my life, and I immediately had to learn how to use it. My first job, I was handed a BlackBerry and told, use it because that's how we communicate. And so very quickly, we had to learn how to survive on technology. Next, we're going to talk about who we all fear. As a hiring manager, I have to tell you, I absolutely do not know who these people are. What's funny is all the research that we're finding, Generation Z is more like the baby boomer generation than we've ever experienced in the relationship of generational management. And I hope that I can share a little bit as to why. So I found this really cool diagram out of a digital company out of the UK. And it kind of explains a little bit about who they are in a really powerful way. You see, like the baby boomers, Generation Z is economically concerned and economically savvy. They're worried about where their money goes and how they spend it, and how are they going to build something better for the future that comes behind them. They are fast thinkers and they are hard workers. They want your direction. They want mentorship. They don't want to be told what to do, but they would like to be guided on how to do it. Baby boomers did apprenticeships. This next generation wants mentorships. They want to know the experience you have. They want to see how it makes a difference. Unlike my generation, don't tell us what to do, we'll figure it out on our own. The often misconception of this new generation, they'd like to know the history. They'd like to see what's behind it. They want an authentic experience. I'm going to say that again. They want an authentic experience. They want you to put the pencil in their hand and they want to see you draw because they have never learned how to draw with a pencil. Most of these young people that you will encounter as you hire them have been impatiently waiting for this very special day. And chances are no one has taught them what you're asking them to do. Fun facts. They're extremely tech savvy. 92% of this demographic can run circles around all of us. And when we get to the AI part, I'll talk a little bit about what I recently learned in my own office. On average, their attention span is that of a goldfish. Yep. 8.25 seconds. If you're on TikTok, you'll understand it. I also don't understand when they're watching TikTok, how they actually will start the video. They won't finish it because they've already decided what's going to happen. They have already made a decision based off of those first few seconds of their interaction. Is it real? Is it authentic? Can they form an emotional attachment to it? They judge you and I the same way in those first 8 seconds of interaction. And Gen Z wants to be treated as individuals. I go back and say it's about equity. They want to reject the idea that they're labeled as one or the other, that their behaviors can be defined by a textbook, or that when they walk in, they'll be assigned seats to sit alphabetically, like I'm sure you all remember Mrs. Smith doing to us in 2nd grade. They reject the idea that everyone is created equal. They love the idea that we have the ability to bring people together to create equality. Some really great, interesting things outside of our industry is that by next year at this time, 27% of these buggers will be around your table, in your classroom, driving next to you, going to work, riding the T or the bus. They're not going anywhere. They're not just going to decide that they don't want to be a part of our generational relationships in the workforce. They're here. And the funny part is most of us in this room remember them looking like the little guys on the left. They didn't talk to you at Christmas dinner. They were too busy on their phone or their iPad, which their parents gave them, by the way, at 3 to watch Disney or Nickelodeon or Baby Einstein. Chances are they're probably going to bring up a conversation that you would have to go research before you can engage with them. This generation is actually smarter than we give them credit for, because they can find that information on said phone faster than you or I could probably pick up the phone and start typing it in. And so they're going to be sitting and making decisions with us in the workforce. What's also happening outside of the generation is, remember I said that they were concerned economically? Well, we are seeing a decline in 4-year institutions. Sorry. The statistics are out there. I didn't make them up. Because this generation sees that it costs a lot of money. They see that their value and what they could make to start their life, to maybe buy that first home that my generation is so strapped with college debt, we can't. So we are seeing a 16% increase in young workers of this generation going to trade school and learning a trade and coming out and making between $300 and $500 an hour with a 2-year trade degree. So while this is outside of our industry, it says really good things for us that are homeowners, that are speccing and working with contractors. It means we have a workforce that just so not long ago we were very concerned about, because people were not going into our trades. And so some good news from Gen Z is, remember I said they want mentorships. So how do they relate to generations before them? You became a master plumber because you interned or you apprenticed. Remember, Gen Z loves that opportunity. And so the trades are very important. Whether you agree with me or not, I feel that many of us in the design profession are in fact a part of this trade force. We have a skilled craft that is necessary to build and create, to save public safety, to build roads. And so when people ask me what I do, I will always say, by trade, I'm a designer. And so I do consider, luckily, the BAC to be a part of, hopefully, this upswing in people seeking out trades to work in our society. Oh yeah, there was a cool little arrow too. We're on the trajectory up. So you can, next slide, please. Most importantly, Gen Z wants to know the business they work for, the car they will drive or not drive, the city they live in, the neighborhood they invest in, will do something better for the environment, the community, their peers, and one another. This is the generation that we hope will save the earth and our environment and our community and we as humanity. This is the generation who cares about someone other than themselves. Not me. I want to point to a really great resourceful network that you may not be familiar with. And many of you as design professionals receive Metropolitan Magazine, I'm sure. And whether you know it or not, behind them is an incredible group called Sato Design Group. And through their research, they're looking at what's going on specifically inside of our industry. And I want to share a little bit of that research with you today. The group that is carving out the network for us is called Think Lab. And Think Lab brought together a workshop day with 1,800 design professionals, 26 firms from across the country, and countless industry partners. And they surveyed these data, and the 4 primary descriptions within our industry that Gen Z seeks in their work environment are up here for us to think about. Not yet. Go back. Too quick. Socialization amongst their peers and colleagues was the #1 desire of Gen Z going into the workforce. Now, of course, they don't tell us how they want to socialize. That's really up for us to figure out. But socialization from a group that 5 years ago were looking at their phones at the dinner table like this, because this is the first time in their life they get to talk to you face to face. Most of these individuals did not have a senior junior prom because COVID kept them home. They finished their first year of college and possibly their second year on a screen. And so you are the first people that they really get to interact with face to face to feel like they're grown up. The second is communication. Remember, it's very different to communicate behind an email. How many times have you been screamed at and then you meet that person and you swear that they're completely different? Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde moment. Communication for them is key. Remember, you might be the first person that has ever taught them how to communicate in a professional manner. This morning, I was walking out of my office building at the design center, and I held the door from someone, and he just looked at me like I had 6 heads. Normally, I reply, "You're welcome," in the good Southern fashion, a little sarcasm. But it dawned on me that this is exactly what the presentation is about today. He probably never was taught or interacted with someone who said, "Thank you, please, you're welcome," which is such a foreign concept to many of us. So in bringing this next generation to the workforce, we have a little bit of responsibility to teach them etiquette in that process. They are true collaborators because they always did everything as a group. They were the first generation that went to preschool, kindergarten, and some in first grade, but all their desks turned face to face. My sister teaches 4th grade and 5th grade, and they still sit 4 groups of 4 face to face. We bring them here to the BAC, and they're in studio face to face. And so the idea that they have to be an individual the first day of work is terrifying for them. So start them collaboratively. Remember that mentorship program. And #4, they want to trust you. Trust goes back to authenticity. They can see right through that wall. And we're going to drill down just a bit more inside our industry for some pragmatics, because I know this is what we want to talk about. They want to close our laptop at 5. Where they differ from generation Y, which is the millennial generation, is the millennials, we need to go home at 5 because we have to go to the gym and go to Trader Joe's, and we might have to take care of the kids or walk the dog. But we're going to get back on that laptop at 10 o'clock when all is quiet and work until 3. And then we're going to go to bed, and then we'll see you at the office when we get up to be there. Right? Some of you know where I'm coming from, right? I hope some of you on the camera also nodding your heads. Generation Z, however, doesn't see that. Less than 50% of the workforce that they interviewed says that their employer and employee relationship is meant to only be a fragment of their life. So the idea that they come to work from 9 to 5:30 is only a portion of what they want out of their day. Very different mindset. They want meaningful mentorships, as I've mentioned. They want a path for growth. They want to know that tomorrow they have the opportunity to advance. We laugh because we think tomorrow they want a raise because they've been there for 6 months. No, that would be my generation. We've checked the box. What's next? Gen Z recognizes that they have to wait. They will be patient, but it's up to us to define what that path looks like. Remember, they probably were never told what a path looks like. They want to see purpose and they want feedback. And what we mean by feedback is they don't want it sarcastically or with cynicism. They want it as they see it, black and white. Give it to me straight. And so with the Think Lab component, we also point out that in this study group, Gen Z overwhelmingly wants interacting, network, and organizational relationships that will get them on that path, that will show them authenticity in our organizations and in our industry. Because, my friends, that's what keeps people here, is it's real. When people turn away and move out of the industry and decide to go do something else, it's because they've had an inauthentic or terrible experience. That's what mentorship and building and growing our community and our firms is really all about, is allowing them to be real. Secondly, I point out that they want security and safety. What wasn't up on the slide that we showed about sort of the perils is that this is the generation that went to school with mesh backpacks before COVID. Many went through metal detectors before they got through their front door. Many schools went to a single entrance component, and many have had anxiety within their being since they were a young age. Fun fact to tell you, American health research has sort of developed, it was reading a Wall Street Journal article putting this together, over 72% of the individuals who are in your firm are on some kind of medication for anti-anxiety, depression, or fear of what may to come unexpected. This generation is born with that. And then they were put behind a screen and forgotten. So we look at the idea that stability and security is something that we can provide them through our communication structures, our desire, and security within our conversations as leaders. And much like the millennial generation, Gen Z is incredibly technologically savvy. As I mentioned previously, 92% of them can run circles around any of us or all of us put together. But what they want out of us is they want their technology to be current. They want to not have to go in and run updates and tell you how to use or show you how to use a program that's 10 years old. And they want you to also know and expect you to know what technology is in the field. They will help you, but you have to have an appreciation and approach it from an open perspective of knowing that. And then I sort of share this last tip with you from Think Lab. And I implore you really to reach out to Think Lab, and they offer a report from this specific day of gathering they did, that in the A&D community, Gen Z is the least comfortable asking for help when they're stuck. They're the least comfortable coming to you with a problem. And so as managers and as leaders and as mentors, it is our obligation to check in with them, to ask them if they need help, to see what they're doing, and see if you can further them along. Remember when I said that you had to define the path that they will walk? It's the same situation here. Many of them were never asked. Many of them come back from single parents. Many of them grew up in dysfunctional homes, in housing, public housing. They grew up with different backgrounds, maybe grown by a grandparent. And so the idea of seeking help is not part of their vernacular, and it requires us to do that. Now, how does this translate into our day-to-day? I want to jump really harshly into the thing that everyone's all excited about these days, and that's the development of AI. Oh, sorry, I forgot I had a slide. There you go. They help us navigate the ins and the outs of the industry, and the AI component is how they're doing it. It's really what they bring to the table, and it's what we should really give their credit due in that process in developing the communication skills. And so AI is trendy right now, and so the millennials, we're all excited about it because we like trendy things. If it could be sold on Etsy, I promise it'd be making millions of dollars. If we could tell our best friend next door that we got it and they didn't, next door is going to get it. But where AI is really jumping to new heights in our industry specifically is experiential learning and experiential development of how we are able to produce our projects, how we're able to communicate to our clients. And this is where the Gen Zers soar. This is where they show you their value the most. And this is where we're all learning. The Gartner report tells us that by 2026, which is not that far away, my friends, that AI will significantly impact the design and development of not only web applications and mobile applications, but if you read that article, it will tell you a list of other things. And we are on that list in engineering and architectural development. It will allow us to do things we never thought could be done by a machine. What is scary, and if you'll click for me, I think we all thought that this, by this time, is what AI would be. I remember watching Terminator and think, oh my goodness, one day the Jetsons really might be reality. And so this is what I fear for many of us is the perception of when someone brings in the idea of look what I can do through AI. My own team in the showroom side of the business at M-Geough is showing me that even in the sales process, we can access AI in a pretty instrumental way. And so I want to share with you some of those cool ways that we are using it in our practice that actually you may not realize could be used in your own, and some of them actually are at no cost to you. So if you will go over for me, and I want to sort of highlight sort of 5 things really quick before we jump into that AI allows us to think faster and be much more efficient than we've ever been. Remember Gen Z and remember the millennials want information now. And so AI helps us connect those generations and manage those people effectively. It allows us to forecast like we've never done before because it's taking data points, it's taking what's current, what historically might be inputted, and bringing it all together and giving us things, an output very quicker, giving us results quicker, and communicating multiple ways. It's improving our design thinking and problem solving. It's not as lengthy a process as maybe the iterative process. Some would argue it's not as thorough. I guess that will be a whole debate we can have at another point in time here. It is improving our manufacturing and factory processes. And I see that every day working with our manufacturers on this side of the business. It's making our factories cleaner, more sustainable. We are having less waste. We are seeing healthier environments. Many of those things obviously are taken to part, and we can't discount OSHA and the work they're doing, but a lot of it also is through this development in AI. And the fifth point in AI development in our industry is that it is breaking barriers and building on equity and making our relationships with our intergenerationals much more powerful. And so you already know some of these things, and so I just highlight them to kind of dip your toe in and invite you sort of as the follow-up to this conversation to go into your firms and use some of this. The first one is there's an incredible AI built into Adobe and into Photoshop. And so this particular image shows you that we were playing around and putting tropical plants in, and that back wall is exactly what we got. And then we asked to put a jaguar and a fountain in the library, and it did it. I don't know about you, but I can't really afford to build a jungle and bring a jaguar into a library for a photo shoot. And so it's allowing us to create atmospheres. It's allowing us to really hone in on what we present to our clients. It's allowing smaller firms and sole proprietors to get larger scale projects that only large scale firms could because they had the technology. It's allowing us to have a moment of equity. It's putting us on an even playing field, and it's allowing all of our minds, regardless of how many individuals you have behind you, be looked at from a perspective that we've never had before. In some respects, the sole proprietor has the same opportunities that Gensler does to go after these projects with the technology that we see being produced in some of these AI components. The next one is actually a part of Google, and that's Gemini. It's an incredible program, and I'm going to show you in the next two slides what it can do. We actually put out a magazine from our showroom called the M-Geough magazine. Oh, I jumped too quick. This one, I'm sorry, I jumped too quick. This one is through Gemini. And what we put in is, you'll notice the furniture is actually furniture we sell through the showroom. And I was working with our creative and talking about how we could show people that they could live and be a part of this furniture. It's very hard to sell things if you can't sit in them. And in a world where everyone wants it on a screen, how do we do that? So we're sort of looking at an old school business that we need to make modern and contemporary. And through our folks, we are creating this idea that we can make livable environments by literally just typing in, can we see this furniture on a beach under the starlight? And within 3 minutes, this is the 3 images that were developed for us using the Gemini platform. The next one now is actually used through Adobe Photoshop. And this is, for me, the most exciting part, because we spent a lot of money doing photo shoots. We spent a lot of time styling them and getting everyone on board. And most of the time, by the time we go back, it's very different than where we started, especially in the commercial world. And so the image on the left is, in fact, the original image that was taken. The image on the right was developed through AI. The idea that we were putting out a fall-winter magazine and we needed it to look fall-winter. And AI completely developed the snow, changing the plants, adding the snow. And even if you look at the corner, casting the sunlight specifically at that point in time. If any of you had to do those wonderful Saturday charrettes here, and you had to calculate how the sun would move over the building right over there, I will tell you AI is a lifesaver, because Lee Peters, who I'm sure is around here somewhere, drove us all crazy with that metrics. And I appreciate him doing that with us many years ago. But I tell you, I much prefer the AI approach. And so the idea that we are able to move time and sun in only a matter of moments in our graphics is actually enhancing the way we practice every day, and really a huge impact of what Gen Z is bringing to the table. I will encourage you, as we leave our presentation today, to begin to think about artificial intelligence in 3 new ways. And if this becomes big, I want you to know that I said it first. I want you to think of it as available information to you. It's now accessible to you. So accessibility information in AI. And it's also about advancing ingenuity amongst our generational relationships. It's the idea that never before we've been able to do things and create and live a professional standard that we've kind of dreamed about. and really took us days to create, we're doing only in a matter of minutes. So hopefully it'll allow us to speed up and perfect who we are as design professionals. And finally, I leave you with a few really good resources that were instrumental in conversation around generational management, how we're bringing AI into that relationship with our folks. And that is, I point out the Sato Design Group, the publisher of Metropolitan Magazine, and their Think Lab group. The ASID organization just put out the annual report, which features a whole session on generational management, economic outlook, and how AI is factoring into that. And believe it or not, Deloitte is investing a massive amount of research into intergenerational management and is an incredible resource to look at. So I invite you to look those up and dive deep into it. We really could have a whole day session in various parts on generational management. I have to tell you, it's very difficult to put it down into about 30 minutes. But I hope that you walked away with an appreciation. I hope that it's in the beginning of a conversation that you can take back to your team and bring into your own management style and vernacular of where we are. I always think about what was taught us here at the BAC is it wasn't a matter of could you do it, but they taught us that you could create a way to do it. It was a way to think. And so I hope that I leave you today with a new way to think about the folks sitting at the table and creating the perfect firm or vision for what you have in mind. So thank you very much.